few weeks ago, my wife, Terry, who's been with you from time to time, my wife and I presided over a committal service for a veteran at the Southern Nevada Veterans Memorial Cemetery right here in Boulder City. While I was waiting for the service to get started, I wandered through the memorial garden that's right near the office. And the plaques and the monuments there really brought tears to my eyes as I thought of what those monuments and memorials represented. Men and women who had served our country in the military during far too many conflicts. Served and died in combat. Now, I too am a veteran, having served as an Air Force pilot for 21 years, a long, long time ago. And I've been fortunate to have known only a few of my friends who have given that ultimate sacrifice to preserve our freedoms. I was also fortunate that as I was on my way to Southeast Asia during the Vietnam conflict, I had a stop in the Philippines to go through jungle survival school. And I was actually out in the jungle hiding from the men who were playing the part of the enemy trying to capture me when the peace treaty between the United States and North Vietnam was signed. But that doesn't mean that I missed the opportunity of getting shot at, and thankfully most often missed, even though I did bring home occasionally some holes in my airplane, because the fighting in Cambodia did not stop with the peace treaty with North Vietnam. And as I was walking through that memorial garden, all of this came rushing through my mind, along with the question, why? There was a protest song during the Vietnam War. Actually, there were a lot of protest songs and demonstrations during that time. But this song by Edwin Starr hit number 1 in 1970. Some of you might remember it. War. What is it good for? Absolutely nothing. The song goes on to ask, is there no place for peace, love, and understanding today? And it ends with the thought, they say we must fight to keep our freedom. But Lord knows there's got to be a better way. So we sit here in the midst of Memorial Day weekend wondering the same thing. Is there a better way? Can't we do better honoring the sacrifices of so many humans? But this Sunday is also designated Peace with Justice Sunday in the United Methodist Church. And I think it's more than a little ironic that these two things are celebrated at the same time. It's not always that way. Next year, Peace with Justice Sunday is June 16th. But here we are, honoring those who died in combat and thinking, there's got to be a better way. Unfortunately, war seems to be a part of our DNA. I read someplace that as of 2015, the United States had been at war 222 of its 239 years. Some of these were so-called Cold Wars, where we teetered on the edge of nuclear war, and of course, there were some very hot wars that filled the cemeteries like the one here. We've even been at war with ourselves. And when there isn't a declared war, a declared armed conflict, we have used the euphemism war for all kinds of things. The war on crime, the war on poverty, the war on cancer, the war, trade wars, border wars, culture wars. War. What is it good for? At the beginning of my Air Force career, I was part of the Strategic Air Command, whose motto was, peace is our profession. This was, as I said, in a missile silo, babysitting a 10-megaton bomb on top of a Titan II missile, ready to kill millions of people in order to maintain peace. And bombers set on alert, loaded with nuclear weapons, waiting for the signal to launch. Peace came wrapped in a rather unusual wrapper. Now, before you label me as a hopeless dove or a snowflake, I want to say that I know that there are times and places that we must stand up to defend our freedom. When we must make the difficult choice to put men and women in harm's way so that we can meet in places like this to worship our Prince of Peace. There are over 50 countries in the world where such a gathering as this would be impossible without risking arrest or worse. And yet here we are. But as I stand here on this Peace with Justice Sunday, I wonder if we're on the right track. Is war inevitable? Have we abandoned the tenets that Jesus brought to us? Is the only justice the justice that comes to us so where we can feel justified that we were right and they were wrong because we defeated them in war? Can't there be another way? Are we really free when we need to spend over half of our budget on defense? Aren't we in a sort of a prison of our own making? The more we rattle our sabers, the more it inflames those who oppose us. Have we forgotten how to talk to each other? How to help each other? How to love one another? Have we cast aside the dream of the prophet Isaiah when there'll come a time when we will beat our swords into plowshares, when we'll beat our swords into plowshares and spears into pruning hooks, when nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. Is that just a pipe dream? A peace pipe dream? I don't believe that Isaiah thought that it was a pipe dream. I don't think he thought it was impossible. Neither do I, even in the face of so much evidence to the contrary. I believe that peace is possible, but it comes at a cost. But war runs a much higher cost, and war does little to ease human suffering. As we look at this question of peace, maybe it's a good time to think about and define what peace really is. I think the easy definition of peace being the absence of war, it's too easy, and it covers up the roots that may lead to war. Maybe we shouldn't just look at peace as the opposite of war. Maybe the absence of conflict is a better definition, because that can lead us to some possibilities that can move us closer to peace. Maybe peace should be our profession. Sounds a little more logical than that of the motto for Strategic Air Command. And one of the titles we have for Jesus is the Prince of Peace. Is there something in his life work that can give us a hint on how to be more active in this profession? Beating our swords into plowshares and our spears into pruning hooks sounds like a pretty tall order, considering how much weaponry has evolved. Surely there's a more accessible place to start. I believe that the passage from Luke that Connie read just a little while ago gives us a beginning point. Jesus went into the synagogue and read from Isaiah, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim the release to the captives and the recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free, proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." That's beginning to sound a little like bringing justice into the discussion. And it is Peace with Justice Sunday. And long ago, Pope Pius VI said, if you want peace, work for justice. I read somewhere that when it comes to fighting injustice, there are four kinds of people. The first are the ones who may see injustice, but due to years of conditioning, are not even aware that there is an injustice at all. The second are those that see an injustice, know that it is an injustice, But rather than do something about it, they make up excuses why they can't help. They blame it on work, time, etc. And soon they start believing their excuses so much that they become like the first group and believe that there's no injustice at all. Now the third are those that know that there's an injustice and actually do something about it, but only as long as it doesn't get them in trouble. They're the ones that will revolt in the meeting room but are rarely seen on the battleground. A majority of the people fall into this third group. They get upset and seek change as long as it does not threaten their status quo, their job, or their comfort level. They are the sort of people that will not help you beyond their comfort zone. But then there is a last group, a rare fourth group. They see an injustice, know that it is an injustice, and take action even if it means risking it all. These are the ones that change the world. Martin Luther King Jr., Nelson Mandela, and someone you may not have heard of. Does any of you remember the name of Kayla Mueller? Kayla was working with Syrian refugees when she was captured by ISIS and held for 18 months, being tortured, verbally abused, forced into slave labor for the ISIS commanders, and raped by the group's top leaders. Kayla died in captivity in 2015 at the age of 26. When her parents asked her why she kept going into these places, these dangerous places, her response was, "We cannot allow human suffering to become normal." Human suffering. Human suffering comes in many forms and results in what Star Wars fans might recognize as a disturbance in the Force. We celebrate and claim our connection to the Prince of Peace, but are there ways that we contribute to this disturbance in the Force? Have we been complicit in allowing human suffering to become normal? Just a month or so ago, we observed the 50th anniversary of the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. at the age of 39. Dr. King, like the brave men and women we honor this weekend, was willing to give everything he had, including his life, to oppose injustice. He once said, "Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter." But too often we hear the cry after a tragic example of injustice, "Now's not the time for action. Wait." This seems to be the rallying cry after each and every mass shooting. This is the time for prayer and reflection, not the time to act. The thoughts and prayers have had no effect in stopping the next mass shooting. As just 10 days ago, we witnessed another tragic school shooting, this one in Texas, where 10 people died. And just a day or two ago, another one in Indiana, where thankfully nobody died. But action, when these events are foremost in the minds of those in power, is necessary. Otherwise, there's no justice, and without justice, there can be no peace. I admit that too often I've been a part of all of those first three kinds of fighters against injustice from a point of privilege as a white male and living as a member of the upper middle class in America. I read about injustice in other countries, but as soon as I put the paper down, it left my consciousness. As a male enjoying the privilege of living in a male-dominated society, I failed to pay too much attention to the fact that women didn't get paid the same wages as men for the same job. As one with pale skin, I noticed how my brothers and sisters with darker skin hues were treated, and sometimes spoke out against this injustice, but was careful not to cross the line to the point of losing my job or my position. I know that I live in privilege, and privilege is the enemy of justice. When we enjoy the fruits of privilege, we are hesitant to risk losing that status just to help someone else. But that wasn't the case for Jesus. He was a member of the dominant culture in Israel. He was a Jew and a rabbi. But he recognized that his people were treating others as outcasts and enemies, often justifying their actions and inactions with carefully selected and expanded segments of their sacred texts. He saw this injustice and put his life and his faith on the line to oppose it and to correct it. In our text from Matthew today, Jesus gave us a blueprint on how we can work against injustice when he told his followers that whenever they gave food to the hungry or water to the thirsty, or clothing to the naked, or when they welcomed the stranger, visited those in prison, they were doing these acts of kindness and justice to him. This is the key to fighting injustice. Actually looking the invisible people in the eye and doing something to ease their suffering. The more we're willing to open our eyes to the realities of the world, the more apparent that there are way too many people who live in injustice. We've seen a lot of injustice uncovered lately. The oppression and abuse of women by men with power in the hope of getting a job or a promotion, as in the casting couch, has been brought to the forefront in the #MeToo movement. But we also have witnessed the uncovering of injustices that seem to be acceptable to people in power who are unwilling to see or work to alleviate the suffering of the poor, the homeless, the veterans, minorities, immigrants, the suppression of voting rights, the portrayal of those living natural but different sexuality as evil, denying health care for all. There's a seemingly endless list of injustices if we just take the time to look and act. The veterans we honor today gave their lives to ensure the freedoms, but how are we using that freedom to bring about peace? I know that there are many in this room who have been active in working toward fighting injustice through the madness for the common good. And as a reconciling congregation, you're making a difference in fighting injustice. And that's the way it should be. The church is supposed to be the place that the message of Christ lives and breathes freedom and equality, but too often we seem more intent on dividing than coming together. Too often we pick on straw man ideas to prove our superiority, that we are closer to God and God's message of love and compassion than some other group. The current unrest in the United Methodist Church over homosexuality is something that threatens to further damage the image of Christianity, that has caused younger generations to wonder what we're arguing about and wander away from anything that smacks of this discontent and harmony, disharmony. And I see why. We've been down that road before. The last major split in the Methodist movement in the United States was over slavery, when one group of humans was deemed less than human, only fit for being slaves to our demands. This battle continues today as a hugely disproportionate percentage of our overpopulated prisons are people of color. We distrust anyone who doesn't look like us, or think like us, or believe what we believe. We continue to draw lines in the sand, even as the sand is running out of the hourglass. Rather than wanting to come together, we seem content to be apart, as long as our part is bigger than the part someone else has, whoever that may be. As long as I have mine, I'm content. Peace with justice. A nice glowing phrase, but one that carries no power, but the power we choose to give it. And giving that power means that we must be willing to sacrifice some of the power that we enjoy. Memorial Day is a day of remembrance. We remember the brave men and women who sacrificed their lives to ensure the freedoms that we enjoy, but too often it seems that we're reluctant to give up anything meaningful in order to help bring peace and justice to this world. Is this to be a Memorial Day for the depth of our quest for peace and justice? When future generations look back at what we have become, will they want to place a wreath on the dream of what peace and justice might have been? Will our divisions that we work so hard to maintain to the point of pushing down and excluding others so we can feel higher and more superior make us unable to act as Jesus acted when he reached out beyond the tribal differences and exclusions to bring about justice, to include more of God's people, to show love and not hate? Can we begin to do more than talk about justice and peace? I believe that not only the future of the United Methodist Church, but the future of humanity depends on what people like you and I do to honor the example of Jesus, as well as the sacrifices of the men and women who have gone before us. It's our choice, and a lot depends on what we do. Can we give peace a chance? Or will we allow suffering to become normal and invisible? It's up to us. But as for me, I agree with Caleb Mueller. We cannot allow these injustices to become normal. We can do better. We can follow Jesus. On page 450, I invite you to turn to page 456 in the hymnal. There's a prayer in there that I'd like to close with. I invite you to pray that prayer with me. I'll give you a minute or two. 4, 5, 6. Let us pray. O Lord, open my eyes that I may see the needs of others. Open my ears that I may hear their cries. Open my heart so that they need not be without suffering. Let me not be afraid to defend the weak because of the anger of the strong, nor afraid to defend the poor because of the anger of the rich. Show me where love and hope and faith are needed, and use me to bring them to those places. And so open my eyes and my ears, that I may this coming day be able to do some work of peace for thee. Amen. Let it be so.